Hello everybody, welcome back to NetTouch Plus. I am your host Jeffrey Wei, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to dynamically inject custom HTML and CSS into an iFrame. If you've ever been to sites like JSBin.com, where you can write your HTML and your JavaScript, and then you get a live preview over to the right, an iFrame is one way that you can accomplish this. So let's take a look at how we can build something like this in 10 minutes or less. So here's our little demo, very simple, but you can see we have the ability to type HTML, and it shows up here instantly. I can then style it as I normally would. Color is red, font size is 50 pixels, font family is sans serif, and you get the idea. All right, so let's figure out how we can build this within about 10 minutes. And here we have essentially a blank template. We are referencing a style.css file. I'm bringing in jQuery, so if I come back and reload the page, it is blank. Now, the last thing I want to do here is I'm going to bring in a script that allows me to update the browser. This is a Mac app called Live Reload. It's just a convenience so that when I type and save, you'll see that it instantly shows up in the browser and I don't have to tab off and on. So it's really handy when you're working on these little prototypes. All right, the first step is, of course, to create our markup. So first, we need a section to store the text areas where we type in our HTML and CSS. And I'll put that in a container. And then, of course, they need to be in a form, but we're not going to give it an action right now. It's just JavaScript. So we'll begin. We have a section for them to put in HTML. And then we have a text area. And I'll give that an ID of HTML so that I can target that later on. And then we're going to duplicate this and do one more for the CSS. Next, we need a section for the output. And within here, we're going to output whatever we type into those text areas into an iframe. So I'll go ahead and create that right now. And next, because I know I want to style the container and the output somewhat similarly, I'm going to give them both a class of grid, just something where I can target them more easily. All right, and that'll do it for the markup. So now we can switch over and do just a quick bit of styling before we get into the JavaScript. The first thing I'm going to do here, and this is a lazy convenience, I'm going to zero out the margin and padding. Honestly, though, in a real application, I would recommend against doing this. It can be a little intensive using the universal selector. You should probably use something like the Eric Meyer reset. But here, it's such a small project, and we want to be quick. So no huge harm done right now. All right, next I'm going to get the body, and I'm going to set the font family to sans serif. A quick tip, if you normally do things like Helvetica, with a fallback to Arial, with a fallback to sans serif, you can really get rid of those two because sans serif will automatically select one of those that's most appropriate. So you can save some characters there. All right, so the next step is to style those text areas right here and here. So the first thing I want to do, maybe we'll give them a width of 100%, and I'll give it a height of maybe around 200 pixels. Now, can you see here that the text area is taking up the entire width of the window? And we obviously don't want that. So why don't we first go and get the grid sections, and that's this div and this div respectively. And I'm going to set a width of 50% on them. And then if I float them to the left, they'll show up left and right, like so. Now, if I give a background color, so for example, maybe we'll set a background color of a grayish color to the text areas. And then if I were to set a different background color to the output, you're going to see that the heights are different. And really for this, I want the background colors to extend for the entire height of the window. And there's a lot of ways to do this. You can apply a background image to the body element. You could use a background gradient, maybe on the container. But in this case, we're going to be a little bit lazy, and I'm going to apply just a quick bit of jQuery. And what we can do is say get the two columns with a class of grid, and then we're going to set the height equal to whatever the height of the window is. And that will make them take up the complete height. And if I reload the page, and shoot, that's not showing up. Let's open up the web developer toolbar, see if there's anything in the console. Oh, that's strange. The scripts aren't showing up at all. Let's come back. Oh, sorry about that. What am I doing here? That's not an image. We want to close an iframe like we would a text area. All right, let's give it one more shot. Yeah, that fixes it. Sorry about that. All right, so now you can see the border of the iframe, and I really don't need that in this case. So why don't we target that and set border to none? And that'll get rid of it like there. And then of course I don't want a background of red. Now the next step is, can you see that the text areas are still too large? I would like to apply a little bit of spacing around them. So right here for the grid, we'll set some padding and maybe 30 pixels on the top and bottom and 50 on the left and right. But what's going to happen here is, now can you see the iframe section, which is essentially blank right now, it has dropped down below. And that's because, of course, we set the width of each one to 50%, so that alone added up to 100%. But then we tacked on additional padding, and in this case, we tacked on 100 pixels worth of padding for each one. So it's now 200 pixels too big. Why don't we take advantage of box sizing? And we're going to use Internet Explorer's old box model, which essentially says that the width that you specify is always the width. And then padding and borders, stuff like that, that will essentially be subtracted from the width. So if I had a 100 pixel wide box and I added a total of 50 pixels worth of padding, with the normal box model, that padding would be added onto the width. But if we use Internet Explorer's old box model, which we can reference like so, we can say, nope, no matter what, that box is 100 pixels. So you're going to subtract that padding in. And now you can see we're back to normal. A lot of people felt that Internet Explorer's box model really was an easier and smarter choice, but that can be debated at a later date. All right, the next step is I'm going to target the text area and maybe give it just a little bit of breathing room on the top and bottom like so. And then the last step is maybe we'll give it a border right of 1 pixel solid white, and then on the output a border left of 1 pixel solid E3, just to give it a little bit of spacing. Can you see right there? Just a little bit. Okay, and this looks fine to me. We're not trying to win any awards here. We're trying to work with JavaScript and injecting data into an iframe. So we're going to leave it at that, and now we get to go and have some fun with our JavaScript. So right here, we're always going to begin by wrapping our code within, this is called a self-executing anonymous function, and that just makes sure that we don't use any globals, and there's lots of benefits to it. So let's get started, and we want to reference the iframe that we created. So in this case, there's only one on the page, but if there are more, you can apply an ID or a class. We'll call it frame, and just go ahead and grab that out of the DOM with jQuery. Now the next step is I want to get access to the body element of the iframe. Now if I reload this and I open up, you can see that when we create this iframe, it's actually creating the HTML, the head, and the body section. So what I want to capture now is this body element. That way I can, whenever I type anything in here to this text box, I can append that to the iframe's body tag, essentially. So we can do this by saying create a new variable called body. And then there's a couple ways. With JavaScript, the way you would do it would be to get the iframe node, and then you could say a content window, and then get the document object. But with jQuery, we can do something a little bit different, and we can use the contents method. So if we switch over to the jQuery API, we can see right here, the content method can also be used to get the context document of an iframe if the iframe is on the same domain, which it is. All right, so that saves us a little bit of time. jQuery will handle some of the slight inconsistencies from browser to browser when it comes to that. Now, in this case, we don't just want the document, we want to find the body element. And now the next thing is, when we add to the HTML text area, we of course want to apply that to the body element. But when we add to the CSS text area, we don't want to add to the body element, we want to apply that to the head section within a style tag. So right here, and I'm going to scroll down just a bit for us, we'll call this style tag, and that's going to be equal to frame. And then we're doing contents again. So why don't we create a new variable called contents, just so we're not repeating ourselves over and over. And then I can remove this and save myself just a bit of extra work and duplication. Now I'm going to get the style tag, we're going to get the contents, we're going to find the head section, and while we're here, let's go ahead and append a style tag to it. And last, I want this style tag variable to reference the style element. So once we're done creating it, we're going to capture that. And if it's easier for you, why don't we put each of these on their own line? There we go. Okay, so now we have our variable set up. Let's go ahead and listen for when we start typing into this text area. And we can do that by using jQuery's focus method. And we'll say focus, then execute an anonymous function. And what we're going to do here is listen for every time they type a letter. And when they do, we want to update the iframe. So what we can do is now say, get the text area and listen for when the user types a key, but not when they press down. We want to listen for when they press up. And that way, if they hold down the key, that event is not going to be firing infinitely. It's only going to fire once you press and lift up. Then what we're going to do here is figure out whether they were typing in the HTML text area or the CSS text area. Now here I'm using this shorthand, and we of course need to create that variable. And that way we don't have to reference jQuery this every time and create a new object. We can just store it once. You may have heard this referred to as caching. All right, so now I'm going to say if this ID is equal to HTML, remember this refers to the text area. So what we're saying here is if it has an ID of HTML, then we want to apply the value of this text area to the body section of the iframe. But if the ID is CSS, then we want to apply it to the style section of the iframe's head tag. Hopefully that makes sense. Now I will expand this because we're running out of room. And we'll say get the body variable. And remember, that's a reference to the iframe's body section. And we're going to set its HTML equal to whatever was typed into the text area. Simple enough. Now, otherwise, if the ID was not HTML, it had to be CSS. So in that case, we're going to get this reference to the style tag, and then we're going to set its text equal to, again, the value of the text area. Pretty simple, right? All right, let's try this out, see if it's working. And I'm going to open up Chrome Developer Tools just in case I made a mistake. Bring that down, and I will type some letters here. So, yes, nothing's showing up, and if we did it right, it should be showing up to the right. Not getting anything in the console. So let's come back. Sometimes I do this scanning thing where I just make sure that I didn't miss anything. Yep, there it is. So here we are trying to do an executing function, but I forgot to actually call it. So let's try that one more time. Type a letter. There we go. And now you can see it's showing up to the right. So this will honor any HTML. Now this is cool, but do you see here how it looks like the iframe is already dropping out? That's because the width is too little. If I find the wrapper, yeah, can you see that the width is too small? Why don't we make sure that we specify that the iframe's width is 100%? And I think that should fix it. There we go. And now it's been updated. So what's cool about this, if I reload, is we can apply any CSS we want. So I could set the color to red, font size to 50 pixels, font family to cursive. And that will update in real time. So it's really helpful for playing around with HTML and tags and stuff like that. I believe W3 Schools does something just like this. So maybe we want to create a task list, and we'll use an unordered list for this. And we'll say add new task. And we want to make this editable, so I'm going to set content editable on the unordered list. And now we can select it, go to store, go to mall, finish screencast. And then of course, if you wanted to, you could add an additional panel for JavaScript that will be injected into it. Maybe if you want to add a session or local storage to your task list, you can have a lot of fun. And it really only took us maybe 5 minutes. The jQuery that's required for this is incredibly simple. Okay, so that's going to do it for today. If you have any questions at all, just leave a comment on NetTuts and we'll definitely help you out. Again, my name's Jeffrey Way, and always visit NetTuts Plus and really the entire Tuts Plus network for more tips, tutorials, screencasts, the best on the web. I'll see you later.